Welcome to another exciting episode of Revolution Gathering. Glad you can make it. I'm just untangling my microphone, so please monkey yourself at home. Greet one another. June 22nd. Welcome. Oh, what a world, folks. What a world we live in. Good morning. What a world we live in. Tell you what, it gets harder and harder to to do these talks when the world gets crazier and crazier. Hey, Lyndon Chuck, good morning. It really does. Oh, so I wanted to show you guys something that my buddy got for me. Brian Yarborough, who you've seen speak here a few times. When I do my videos, my clip videos and stuff, I usually have to hold the phone and all that. And one time when I was in Las Vegas, I wanted to do a talk. While I was there with Brian, and so I asked Brian if I could borrow his little post for the camera. And so he gives me this thing. He's like, "Yeah, go ahead." So I took it down, and I was like, for the life of me, I couldn't figure out how the thing works. Now, this shows me there's some stickers to kind of give you an idea, but it was like, I thought, is it a can opener? Is he screwing with me? Is it a joke? Is it, what is this thing? Honestly, I couldn't even show it to you right now because I'd have to look at the directions. I finally looked him up online and was able to use it, and I had a talk. It's me in that red room in Las Vegas, but he sent me one yesterday, so I don't have to hold the phone in the car when I'm doing my, angry man in a truck. I'm never angry, but you know what I mean. I mean, I'm angry, but not when I'm doing my videos. So anyhow, that was nice. I'm trying to think of some positive things, It's like, we need a little positivity, not just negativity. I've been feeling particularly down this weekend. Just so much going on in the world. We've attacked Iran, which is insane. We bombed Iran. It was wild because back in the day when I would try to find something positive to say about Donald Trump, his first term, I would always say, well, at least he's not like a war-hungry president. At least he's anti-war. And unfortunately, that's not true either. So yeah, we're in a tough place now. I me, I'm also got to be fair because I don't like to just feel like my Republican friends come here and feel attacked. I mean, the Democrats also supported war on Iran as well. I mean, if you just go back and watch some of the interviews with the folks who are running, even the vice president who was running for vice president, was it Tim Waltz from my old state, Minnesota? He even defended war if there had to be one with Iran. So we've got a lot of politicians who like to, Democrats and Republicans both love war equally, unfortunately. And that was a hard part for me growing up because I was such a hardcore Democrat, that I kind of had to be in denial for a while about that. And that was tough. So, hard truths here, folks. It's like nobody's safe, so everybody can be safe. Does that make sense? It's kind of like the way we do it here is, no one's going to be, we're not going to toe a line, or at least we're going to try to be as honest as possible here. And I think that's what you really would want if you're going to some sort of religious meeting, for it to be as honest as possible. So I guess we'll jump into it. I don't really want to jump into it because I'm so tired. I'm tired of everything that I see happening in the world. I'm tired of what I see happening with immigration right now. Um, I'm tired of seeing people grabbed out of the streets. Um, honestly, when I woke up this morning, and you see a lot on social media. More people now are getting news off social media, which I don't think that's a great thing. But we also have a lot of really our news stations are really compromised as well. But today I saw a video, and it was a probably a 3 month old baby in a diaper, laying next to its leg. And the baby was being taken care of, and was obviously medicated and doing better, but the little child had to lose his leg, and this is in Gaza. And like Gaza continues, even though we have ice on our streets, Gaza, there's just all sorts of horrible things that are continuing under our government. And it's wild is because it's just really the volume's been turned up more than anything, because this is all stuff that's been done before. Like ICE was on the streets before. ICE was on the streets during the Biden time. I mean, Obama deported lots and lots of people. It just wasn't video. It wasn't made to look. They did it in a more quiet, maybe even, if you could argue, humane way. But still, that was something that was happening. I mean, I think ICE is only 12 years old, so I don't think we can give Obama anything there. But it's a horrible world we live in, and our politicians, seem to be more worried about finances and money and things like that than our humanity. It's wild when you're going through this. I mean, I just lost my insurance, and then they had me switch me to a lower insurance, and I'm seeing people who can't pay their rents and can't make ends meet, and the government doesn't want to do anything. I had this conservative guy. He wasn't a Republican. What was it? He was a libertarian, arguing with me like, oh, kids shouldn't have meals. But then when I was like, well, what about war and things like that? And then he was like, well, you've got to understand. And we have all these like crazy ideas of like killing people. Like, we're America, we're the best, we're free. But war is more important than children. War that protects other countries or protects our financial interests are more important than us having the financial interest to not let children go hungry in our own country. It's insane, and then this guy was also arguing pro-life, but it was like pro-life up into birth, and then after that, kids have to, pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And the irony of all this stuff, and I know this sounds like liberal talk, but I go beyond that. I'm just saying that this is just humanity talk, human talk, caring about one another. But what I wanted to talk about today was Christianity and Christians in general are very good at compromising when it comes to money and to war. We're really good at compromising that. We're also good at like making things all about us, like, turning Jesus into a member of our tribe. And, well, Jesus was a vegetarian, or Jesus was gay, or Jesus was heterosexual, or Jesus was this, Jesus, we always, and I understand that because we were trying to relate to it. But, we're always good at just either making things fit for our scenario, or fit for the story we find ourselves in, or make fit for our compromise, or getting what we want, or getting what we need, what we think we need. Or what we desire to fill that lack within us that's never filled. And so we're really good at that. And I'll give you an example. Christianity was seen as a majority non-violent religion for the first 300 years. Like 300 years of Christianity, and then Constantine came in and made it a political thing, and the religion of the government. And of course, you have a government, you're going to have soldiers and you're going to have these things. And so he brought that in as part of it. And so then we've got justifiable war and just, and so I was talking to a leader, someone who I would consider a Christian leader, the other day, and we were talking about war, and I said, well, I'm nonviolent, and it's really funny because the way he talked to me about my nonviolence, and I was like, well, it's like Dr. King, I'm like trying and I don't believe in war. I don't think that's the way we should solve things. I think there's better ways. That's why I talk about arguing well and disagreeing well. And he talked to me as though like I was talking about fairies and unicorns and, just like, oh, bless your heart, Mr. Baker. That is such a, I really admire your people. I really admire people like you. You know what I mean? Like it was almost like he was just saying, like, it's so cute that you're so delusioned. I wish I could be delusioned like you, But I guarantee if I asked this person if they believed in a virgin birth and a physical resurrection, and people being healed from the blind and raised from the dead, he would be like, of course, But I'm crazy because I think that we can have hard conversations, that diplomacy could actually work if we invested in diplomacy like we invest in weapons of war. But I'm the crazy one, So it's just we pick and choose these things of where we're willing to compromise or what we're willing to say. In a way, it was wild because I was like, well, the Bible says. So I start, this is this Christian leader. So I think, well, maybe I should just, well, what about the scripture that says, and I didn't even say that. I'm like, well, but the scripture says this. And I said, the first 300 years we were nonviolent, and all this stuff. And he's like, oh, and it wasn't this exactly what they said, but it came off very much like this, like, well, you don't really believe that part of it, do you? Like, you don't really think that's impossible, do you? Like this weirdness of like being like, you don't think really loving your enemies is something we can actually try to do. You don't really think like loaning to someone without expecting money back is something we can really possibly do. Like that doesn't make that, I mean, it was like, really? Like, but you believe in like predestination or free will, and you buy into all this kind of stuff and afterlife and hell, and you'll exclude LGBTQ people, but like loving your enemies is like not going to war, being peacemaker. That's like, well, that's a little bit of the naive part of the Bible. So to me, it's like we love to pick and choose that stuff. Because for me, I would say more of like the miracles and stuff are the things that I would struggle with being like, well, they're literal or not, But it's really easy to write off stuff like this. It's really easy to write off the words of Jesus. So we're going to look at a few of those things and talk about that. Like I said last week, this is kind of where we find ourselves in. I love to talk about grace. I love to talk about theology. I like to talk about philosophy. But right now we're in such a place of really asking us, where are we with this faith? Does Christianity really matter, or is it just, just something that we kind of wink at and we just kind of pretend to carry with us? Something that's not really true. Something that's kind of like, we like, it's cute. We're Americans, so we're all Christians, Have my Bible, But then it's like, and it really works well when you want to exclude people. But then when it comes into this full conclusion of enemies and things, it gets really uncomfortable for us. So last week we talked about human dignity and living in human dignity, and how what we're seeing on the streets of Los Angeles and the streets in Chicago and all the streets of all over these cities, and where we're seeing our undocumented brothers and sisters treated horrifically and violently, and just seems very unjust. Like, what happened to human dignity? And we're going to look more at human dignity of the other. And one of the verses that I feel like we always have to, compromise or come up with and say it means something else. I've seen all this done my whole life of people trying to say, well, what it really means or what it doesn't mean. That's why I really like scholarship. So you can just get in and go like, okay, this was the audience that was spoken to. This is how they would have heard it. And this is what it means. Are there times I want to have more of a philosophical look at the scriptures, or a little bit, where does this meet us right now? Of course. But you try to blend that with the knowledge and the reality of what they were talking about at the time, where they were at, and what they were saying. But I think the Beatitudes is always a good place to go. And often the Beatitudes that are most ignored by both conservative Christians, I'd say conservative Christians are getting a little bit better at not ignoring the love your enemies and some of that stuff. Because lately I've seen some conservative Christians reaching out to people who've fallen or said some things, but the left is I guess tired of being told they're not Christian enough or they're not the right ones, and so they still have a really rough time. Some of my social justice friends have a really hard time loving their enemies often. And especially when it comes to other Christians who don't talk about the stuff that they like. So it's really a struggle. Now, we're always going to have disagreements, but that's why we say disagree well. Like, we don't have to write each other completely off. And we do have to remind ourselves that we want to see people change. We don't want to destroy people. We want to see them change. Unfortunately, with war and weapons, there is no chance in that. That's just done. That's just the final judgment is war and weapons and guns and bombs and things like that. That's the final judgment. So we act like, well, we can talk about war and see, but no, that closes the doors on everything. That's just the end for those people who were hit by those bombs. Their lives are ceased to exist. And people, we will justify collateral damage. We'll justify the loss of human life. We're justifying starving children. We're justifying innocent bystanders. We generally justify soldiers being killed and policemen being killed and criminals being killed. We're very good at just saying, like, that's just how it works, rather than we can do better. Because to be honest with you, when I say argue well, that's meaning we can do better. When I say that we've got to have a reformation in the church, I'm saying we need to do better. When I say grace is anarchy, I'm saying we need to do better, because we've got to understand what grace really is. We've really got to understand that anarchy within grace. And when I was in DBT, dialectic behavior therapy, one of the things they talked about is I'm doing my best, but I can do better. Like, I'm doing my best right now, but someday I hope to do better. It was this idea of embracing the dialect of like, hey, I'm doing the best I can, and maybe I could do better, but not right now, because I'm doing the best I can, but one day I hope to do better. So there was that kind of built-in hope there, and I really like that hope. Matthew 5:9 says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And it is as though we have completely forgotten that, and that we've forgotten that to create peace, both sides have to come together. That's why I really, really, once again, I know I'm a broken record when I come to some of these guys, but why the troubles and the Good Friday Agreement was so interesting and so revolutionary to me is because you've got these sides that are completely opposed to one another. Don't really think either one has the right, to be, one doesn't have the right to be military. The other one doesn't have the right to be here. They don't, there's violence, there's all these horrible things. And they realize, like, we've got to find a compromise here, which seems to be, everybody thinks compromise is a four-letter word. We've got to find a compromise here where we're able to all exist and we're allowed the people to make the decisions, where people are able to have the voice, where people are able to have the vote. But we're all going to have to lose something. Like, nobody's going to win. Nobody's going to completely lose either. But we have to find something here to make this happen. And that happened with John Hume and the nonviolence resistance in Northern Ireland. It's not perfect, but nothing's perfect, it's not perfect. People say it's not perfect, but it's because it's not perfect for any side. For one group of people didn't get exactly what they wanted. And guess what? If I found out anything about life in this world, is no one ever gets exactly what they want or what they deserve or what they need. We used to have a shirt that said purveyors of peace, and this idea was just to be a play on the words of blessed are the peacemakers, just encouraging people to talk about peace, to try to help solve issues. That's why we say argue well. That's why we say disagree well. That's why I believe in unity through diversity, and celebrating diversity and finding a way to come together through our differences and appreciating our differences, because differences are a fact of life. The differences of religions, the differences of faith, the differences of our skin tone, the differences of our the stories we find ourselves in are just a part of reality. You know, I mean, you can think of all these differences we have, and how do we find unity through that? So Jesus is talking to these folks, you know, and I'm already past like, blessed are the meek, blessed for those who thirst for righteousness, blessed are the merciful, just to jump down to saying, blessed are the peacemaker. And today I sent a message to my buddy Brian, and I said, Brian, I don't know how to preach today. I said, I feel so hopeless. Like, I feel like, you know, there's all these wars, everything's going upside down. And how is anything I'm going to say make a difference? I mean, it's hopeless. And he did say, well, at least we have each other, which sounds very cliche, right? But I think about the importance of my friendship with him and my relationship with some of you folks, and the bright moments that I see. And, you know, if it's just us working towards peace and helping spread a message slowly that, you know, like they did with the Good Friday Agreement. I mean, it took them 30 years to find peace there. Then we have to really stay organized. We need to get better organized, stay as organized as we are, grow in that, like we're doing the best we can, but we can always do better. You know, continue to get this message out there and continue to say we are not going to accept peace through violence, because that's not peace. We're not going to say, hey, we're going to blow you up. Now we want peace. I mean, that's what Darth Vader was saying in Star Wars. That's what the Empire in the movie Star Wars is saying. We are going to bring galactic peace through the Death Star, you know. And, you know, we're going to get everybody to obey and do the right thing, and that's our, you know, and that's what Luke Skywalker and all those guys are fighting against, was this group that said, we're going to bring peace. It's just going to be peace through intimidation and peace through violence. And that's just doesn't work. So, you know, you have blessed are the peacemakers. One of probably the most ignored verses of our time and in the church at our time, where you have people so willing to stand behind politicians on either side. I mean, gosh, we lost so many people when I was speaking out against Gaza during the presidential race. And I said, I just can't support this, you know, my Democrat brothers and sisters right now, because they support this war. And a lot of you folks out there, I don't know if they've come back, stop donating, stop listening, stop going. And that's your prerogative. I get it. Like, I don't want to hear that. You know, I think those people aren't as important as these people, or I just want to be safe here. I mean, I get all those instincts, but as a leader and as a speaker, I can't live in a moment like that where I'm like, well, I'm okay. It's okay if nobody else is okay. As a leader, as someone who wants to be a reformer, who wants to see change in the world to be a better place and a safer place, I can't just go like, oh, I'll just, you know, ignore the suffering of these folks so we don't have to suffer. And I understand people say, well, we could have done this, we could have done that. Well, I had to follow my convictions, and I encourage you all to follow your convictions, even if your convictions are different than mine, of course. But we're called to be peacemakers, and that says how we act like children of God. And everybody's like, oh, we're children of God, and praise and worship and all that stuff, but it's like you don't see people being peacemakers. If anything, we see the exact opposite, even with our words, but especially bad when we're supporting, you know, politics that support the killing of so many innocent people, without even looking at the option of really a peaceful conversation, working it out with, you know, bringing in peacemakers. Could you imagine if we put that type of money, those millions and billions of dollars, into having people to broker peace? Anyhow, I digress. Matthew 5:38 even says, where did I go? Where are you, Matthew? Matthew 5:38 says, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, which was actually said quite a bit in the Old Testament. It's said in Exodus, it's said in Leviticus, and in Deuteronomy, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Like, you know, someone takes your, and that's what I hear people argue all the time. Well, they did this. Well, what about this? Or like justifying the ICE raid. Well, one of my friends had an overdose of fentanyl as that they know that fentanyl came from Mexico, good chance it may have. But the point is like, well, that's why all these families who are hardworking should be ripped apart because, someone undocumented worker came in and sold us this. That's the argument, is that, well, a few broken eggs, that's where we come. It's just, that's the compromise we've come to, is that people suffering death or suffering being put into prisons to where God knows where, or sent back to a home that they haven't lived in 20, 30 years, or separating families is somehow justified because their drugs came in, because another group brought drugs in. And then that just ends up becoming racism, because you say, well, then it's just everybody from that race or everybody from that place or that community. So we really have to check ourselves when we're thinking that way or justifying things that way. I've had a lot of friends, MS-13, man, and you got to think about that. I'm like, yeah, but everybody's going to pay the price for the MS-13. You're sending a hairdresser there who had a crown tattooed on their arm, to a place they'd never been, into basically a camp, a prison camp, for the rest of his life because he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time and happened to look a lot like those people. If you don't think this is Christianity, I really want to challenge you to start thinking of Christianity a different way. We act as though, and I was watching Mark Maron last night telling jokes about Christianity, and that's when I always kind of even turn into more of a Mark Maron. I'm like, oh, here he goes. He's going to point out all of our stuff. This is going to be fun. He always throws out hypocrisy of other groups as well, but, he's saying like, yeah, you guys are like, hey, when we all die, we're going to go and be happy, and we're going to get to a happy place, and everything's going to be good. Pass the plate, but in his image, that's what Christianity is a place. It's like, hey, once we leave this world, everything's going to be cool. Let's take now let us make some money while we're here as the church. And he has a point in some, like, if we think Christianity is about something beyond this world, we've really lost it. Remember, you ever heard that saying, you're so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good? And I often feel like that's where we're at in this world, is we've just become so focused on like, oh, well, when we get to Beulah land. Or we'll just do that to justify the suffering now. So 5:38. So you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And I get it. I kind of like that idea sometimes. Sometimes I want to be angry and fight and get revenge. But then in 39 it says, but I say to you, do not resist an evildoer, but if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. Now people have argued, well, that's so, then they have to use their backhand and you're seen as an equal. You're still getting slapped. Even if you're getting slapped as an equal, you're still getting slapped. But that's what Jesus says, is like, it's not about getting even. What was it, Gandhi? It's given to Gandhi all the time. I've heard it given to a bunch of people, but an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. So obviously people stick to more like, well, they've heard it in Exodus, they've heard it in Leviticus, they've heard it in Deuteronomy, and now just Jesus comes along and says this thing, but Jesus changes things, It's like, reminds me when the Joker in The Dark Knight, when he's talking to Batman, he goes, you change things, You changed, and this town deserves a better kind of criminal, because he's upset because he's like, you've made these guys run scared and meet and hide from things. You've changed things. And Jesus changed things, but changed things to say, it's not about revenge anymore. It's about nonviolent resistance. I think that's why Dr. King really got into this, is because he saw what Gandhi was doing, but then he saw it right there in the Bible. Luke 6:27. I'm going to jump over to Luke, because I feel like people always know, well, Jesus says this, we do all this, either compromise in the Bible or say all this stuff to kind of support a justified war, or to do the opposite of the Bible. So I just want to talk about some of these scriptures, the things that we're just so we're reminded, and we can remind each other. If you're a follower of Jesus, if you're not a Christian, you're probably like, oh, Jay, I'm done. I'm out. Sorry, buddy. I love what you're saying. I would say just listen to the spirit of this idea and say, hey, there's some Christian things there's some things I like about that Jesus, and these are the things he said, and there's some violent things. I might not think he was the Messiah, but there were some good things to learn from this. So at least be open to hear that today, I ask, because I know you're not all Christians. I talk to you guys. I know that a lot of you are like, oh, you're the only Christian I can really listen to, and I don't really buy into all the stuff, but I like what you're saying. So just hear it out. Just hear it out. I'm not here to convert you into Christianity. What I want to do is help to convert you into living in a better world now and helping people, or a better world for your children and grandchildren and the people who come down in life. I'd much rather see things get better now, but it doesn't look that good, does it? Luke 6:27. But I say to you, listen, love your enemy, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, of the other, turn the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you. And if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. And then it goes on to say, if you love only those who love you, what credit is that to you? So that's all the way around Luke. Obviously, he's saying something very similar. It might have been the same thing, just heard from a different perspective. But I think it's worth hearing. Matthew 5, back to Matthew. Matthew 5:44, just a few down from you've heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your own. 43, you should love your neighbor. You've heard that he said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemies. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. This is the part I feel gets left out a lot. Every time I see like my more progressive friends who I really love a lot of the nonviolence work they do, but then I hear them start talking about other Christians and other people that they don't agree with, and they start forgetting that we're supposed to pray for them and not scapegoat them, or it's like they work with people who've come out of prison who have criminal records, and they're very graceful about it, but then they start bringing about the criminal records of the pastor, or what the pastor did, or what this person, what I mean? Like they hold, well, we're going to count their sins against them. We're going to show, I understand where they're coming from, but I'm just saying it's not consistent. I would love to see more consistency in how we treat one another. And that doesn't mean we don't confront each other and we don't speak truth to each other. It's just, I don't think we have to take the low road with one another. I think there's a better, higher way to do it. It's like speaking some of these verses to each other. Well, what about this one? And what about that? What about this conversation and what we're called to do? If you're someone who feels like you need to go to the Bible to do this, I, at this point, don't feel like I have to go into the Bible to do this. I share the Bible with folks to kind of remind them of what Christianity is and what it represents. But for me, I do things because I have convictions to love others. And that might be because I've spent so much time rediscovering the Bible when I was about 20 years old and where I've come to now. But I say, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be a child of your Father in heaven. For he makes the sun rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. So these are things I would hope we would be reminded of constantly. If I jump back into Luke and go back to 6:35, I should have done both Lukes in a row, but oh well. Just how I take notes sometimes. Where are you? 30. But love your enemies, do good, and lend, expecting nothing in return. This is a radical call. This is the radical call that most of us ignore. I don't go out being like, hey, here's $100. Don't worry about it. That's a scary place to be. I know people who've done that for me, and it's really amazing. Some of you support this work. It means the world. But how many of us really do that every day and lend to people who are against us? That's a level I haven't quite reached yet. Matthew 22, jump to the end over here towards the end of Matthew. 6 says, Teacher, which commandment, when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him, Teacher, which of the greatest commandments in the law is the greatest? He said to him, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And the second is likely, You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law of the prophets. And the as I was thinking about that is in the 10 Commandments, it says, do not kill, So when you love your neighbor as yourself, when you love others as yourself, you're most likely to not want to see them die or kill or suffer or go hungry or starve or even have your religion forced upon them if you love people as you love yourself. Unfortunately, I don't know if we even know how to love ourselves anymore because we've been so mistreated by capitalism and by bad theology and by bad politics. But selfishness is really a thing that Jesus is continuously trying to pull us away from, is being selfish, of just taking care of ourselves and our own, is to love all these different people. That is the message that is there. That's why I probably stick with Christianity. That's probably why I stick with Jesus and this faith. Even when I have serious doubt, I stay with it because I feel like there's this love and this grace that I want to continue to bestow. So even if tomorrow I said, well, I'm done with my faith, I would still turn back to these words and to encourage others and to remind this and be grateful for the foundations that it's laid within my life. Even that love that I saw from my mother. I saw it so interesting and from the way my mother loved people, because she had this foundation of being told all these people are bad, all this is, and she would constantly use love as the trump card with others. And she just knew she had to. She struggled with like gay marriage and things like that when it was about, but she knew that she had to love these people and that they weren't mistakes and they shouldn't feel bad about themselves, and then that was just people doing that, but they were loved. She always knew that love, and she knew it from her studies and not from reading liberal books or reading any other kind of people's real stuff. She read mostly romance novels, if you guys want to know the truth, the ones with Fabio on it before we knew Fabio was a real person. But she knew instinctively from the time that she had spent in the Bible that she was called to love people and that love was the most valuable thing. What did Jesus say? They will know you belong to me for your love for one another. And you might say, you're a broken record. That's okay. I don't find to be a broken record. If people start to become untrained from their compromises and their bad theology and thinking that they're God's special chosen people to destroy other people, if we can get people away from that, from being a broken record, then so be it. I have to continuously read about nonviolence because nonviolence isn't just nonviolence of the fists and weapons, but it's also of the mouth. There's times I want to say horrible things to people when I see it, but it's also trying to guard your heart from that. And so I read Dr. King and read what he had to say and read the principles of nonviolence. And sometimes it's a real struggle, and doesn't seem like the coolest thing to do sometimes, but it requires patience. It requires hope, and sometimes it requires me just saying, like, listen, I'm doing my best, and hopefully one day I can do better. Matthew 22, did I finish? I don't know if I finished reading that part to you guys. 36. 36 all the way to 40. And second is, I've read that. So, this is what the reminders of what Christ has called us to. When we went through Galatians, if you remember our study through Galatians, that whole thing was like, be with one another, restore one another. If you think you're too good to help restore someone and help, you're only fooling yourself, love each other. What's important is faith expressing itself in love, but instead you bite and devour one another, beware of being consumed by one another. And there he's talking about words, but now we're looking at places where people are being violently pulled off from the streets because they said, well, you're not here legally, rather than saying, hey, we can figure out a way to do this and help these people and get them either here legally or get them where they need to be. Instead, we've got these bullies on the street with masks dressed like military people with no identification. It's terrifying. That's not the America I grew up in. I feel like the soul of America is dying because of things like this and because of these continuous wars that we just continually support, where we don't even, we're not even working it. We're just striking people, not even giving people the chance to have these peace talks. So that's what Paul means when he says that. It's all over there. When faith without works is mentioned, I know I'm a broken record, but it's all about the feeding the hungry, clothing the cold, reaching those people where they're at. That is what grace is about. That's what forgiveness is about. That's what the story of the Good Samaritan is about. When Jesus was asked, and he tells the story of the Good Samaritan, he's trying to say, like, this is your enemy, and your enemy comes along and shows you love and grace and restores you. Who's acting as the best brother here? The one who did the action of restoration and love, not the one that walked past you, even though they were technically your brothers and sisters. They were technically part of your people and your tribe, but they didn't stop and help you. The ones that stopped and helped you are your brothers and sisters. I mean, these are all the points of these things we talk about all the time. And I hate to say it, but I just feel like it's such a grace book. It's such a forgiveness book. It's such a peace book. And Jesus really does change things when he comes. There's no more eye for an eye. There's no more tooth for a tooth. There's no more exceptions for violence. Why do we allow politics and loyalty to them and to our politicians to deny our faith? It's like, like I said before, hearing people have this conversation where we talk about nonviolence and loving your enemies and things like that, and they're like, that's really cool that you believe that, and I really look up to you, but it's kind of a fairy tale, But then they accept the parts that really sound like a fairy tale. Water into wine and resurrect. Well, of course I believe those things, Jay. Are you insane? It's just, I live in a real world where we have to have violence and we have to have wars and we have to kill each other. And it's complicated, and that's the best way. It's complicated. It's very complicated, so we can't work it out because it's so complicated and nobody knows how to do it because it's so complicated. That's the excuse. It's complicated. People are dying and we're going, oh, it's complicated. People are being tortured and families. It's really complicated until it starts to be your family torn apart. It's really complicated until bombs start landing in your neighborhood. And when your loved ones start to die, or when your loved ones are imprisoned, or when you go through it yourself. It's very easy to sit in judgment when you haven't experienced and been through it, and then all of a sudden it comes to you, and all of a sudden maybe it's not that complicated to negotiate peace. Maybe it's not so complicated for us to spend more money on health care, and when you have someone who dies from that. I was reading a story about this guy whose dad found out he had onset Alzheimer's, and he knew they couldn't afford it, so he just killed himself because he knew that they didn't have the insurance to do it. I mean, that's what the realities we live in every day, yet we're spending billions on removing immigrants, and we're spending billions on wars, killing people who aren't part of our country, and yet we still watch the innocent and treat the innocent die, and we allow our civilians here in America to die every day. So if you think this is a Christian nation, you're really just fooling yourself. You can put the 10 Commandments in every church and every school you want to. You can ban drag story time, all you want to. But until you start to realize the love for other people, the fact that we're called to love our enemies and pray for them and do our best to work out these situations and our best to restore them and find peace with them, until then, we will never even be closely resemblant to a Christian nation. Yeah, we got a lot of churches. But, that doesn't do anything. Especially when a lot of those churches just go like, oh, we just whoever's, we love the warmongers. I get tired of hearing, oh, that's a nice thought and all. But the reality is, especially from people who claim to be followers of Christ, I can get it when people who are like, I don't want anything to do with Christianity and you got to live in reality and this is how it is. But people are like, no, I love Jesus. And, but the reality is we have to, ignore that. And then they get mad at us for the stuff that they believe we're ignoring. But realizing that, nonviolence can be, a reality. so much misinformation that it's become truth to the masses of how Christians believe and how Christians think. I mean, like I said, I was watching that Mark Maron thing. He's like, if you guys are all about after death being happy, and then, just getting money from your congregations until, promising them happiness after death. I mean, that's what they see from a thing. They see hypocrisy of Christians supporting, people who are tearing families and lives apart. There is no Jesus there. We buy into the rapture, raising people from the dead, but not peace. One day we'll all go to heaven, Jay, and we'll live in a magical world with beautiful fountains and beautiful houses. And then I go, well, what about peace? And they go, oh, come on, Jay, come on, you're better than that. Jay, it's biblical to support Israel, so I kind of have to turn a blind eye to the starving children because it's biblical. Oh, okay, yeah, show me that. And can you also explain the New Testament? And can you also explain what Paul said about grafting people into the tree and that there is no longer Jew nor Gentile, nor slave nor free? Can you explain those things? What about how we're treating our undocumented brothers and sisters? So, I'm probably preaching to the choir here at Revolution. I know that, but I guess I'm preaching to the choir that you all continue to speak loudly to one another and share this truth with each other. And, realize that we live in a country that is one of the greatest advocates and purveyors of violence in this world. And that is tearing people apart. And that, that our politicians on both sides have become more concerned with serving corporations and serving than serving the people and then helping each other out. And that's something we really desperately need to think about. And it seems almost impossible, but I think that's the reality. If we really want to accept the reality we find ourselves in, and how do we really love our enemies as ourselves, and how do we love our neighbors as ourselves, that's a tough one. It's a very tough one, and it's going to have to, there's going to have to be compromise, I'm sure, but we've got to start speaking truth to politics, And I want to make it clear, it's so easy because Trump is such a bull in a china shop to just say, well, it's all him. And if we had just had Kamala, Harris, if we just had Harris here, we would, everything would be better. I saw a sign, if Harris was president, we'd all be having brunch right now during the march of No King's March. And I was thinking, but she was, supported the war in Israel, and they supported going to war with Iran if Israel wanted to. That was part of it. Like the war, they just supported the same things. I have not seen, Obama is the most I've seen healthcare come close to being somewhat decent. But, me, I have to switch my healthcare every few months because I don't have a consistent income. So life is not lived. It's not easy to live life on life's terms in the richest country in the world when we're so focused on, on others and othering others even more and destroying others' lives. And we're not even very good at loving our neighbors, much less our enemies. So that's the word for today. Sorry, this is going to be probably a drum I keep beating until we get to a better place. And I'll try to find more unique, interesting ways to beat this drum. But I think it's very important that this is the type of thing we have on our heart and our minds and that we're thinking about as we move forward. It's just, it's just so much that it just becomes almost impossible to have these conversations because I feel like there's so much I'm leaving out. If you like what we're doing here at Revolution, the little end pitch, please consider helping our work by making a tax-deductible donation. Revolution Church, you can go to revolutionchurch.com. We have PayPal and we have Venmo. We only exist with you. I have been working a lot on my other jobs, so that's been hopeful and helpful to see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. I've been doing construction work, kind of painting and prep paint through the week, but those jobs are come and go. My after school program job is ended for the summer, so I'm excited about next year though, because I'd like to go. I look forward to going back, and I like working with kids and helping at the school. And then you see a lot of other really harsh realities of what our public school system is and what, how little they have. And it just seems like, it does start to feel like you live in a world that we've got our priorities upside down. And we have very short-sightedness when it comes to the world. It's very sad to me that we're not thinking about the future. But yeah, so you can help support our work. And we're thinking about the future. And we're going to continue to think about the future. And we're going to continue to have these tough conversations. And the more independent Revolution becomes, the more we can do, the more we can have these talks, the more we can maybe even meet up in person. And we can start to even become more organized, the more of us that come together. So please, you can also help by sharing this stuff on Instagram and on YouTube and all those other places, and let people know what we're doing, what we're talking about, and that there is some hope for the church, and that we're looking for reformation in the church, in a big change, a big reformation that has to happen. It's been over 500 years since the last one. It's time for a new one. And we got to get people more focused on love and grace and forgiveness and all the things we just talked about in order to move forward. So the church is actually even recognizable, because at this point, if you really spend time in where you don't see a church that you really see recognizable on either side, and we've got to be better at loving one another and not scapegoating each other. That is one big goal that I have here, is that we grow in a better way and we have better conversations, and that churches start to let down some of their freaking walls, and we learn to work together. And not all be a bunch of Lone Rangers or depend on our denominations and things like that. We're able to really work together. We're really good at, some of us are really good at doing interfaith dialogue, but when it comes to our own Christians and our own different denominations coming together and having dialogue, it seems to be stale, and that nothing's happening. I put out a call for other denominations to be welcoming and opening to pastors from the Southern Baptist Church who don't want to follow the anti-gay marriage agenda in the Southern Baptist Church, and who want to leave, and no big church said anything to me. No pastors from any of the other churches were like, yeah, this is a great idea. They all just, and I had over 1,000 people watch that video. I know that, but just people just doesn't seem like, oh, once again, it's like, oh, Jay. But I'll continue to be a thorn in the flesh of those folks, and we'll continue to speak truth. And I hope you'll be a part of that by helping support us financially, and by letting people know about the work and inviting them to check this out on Sunday or whenever they can, because it's up on podcast. They can listen anytime. They can watch here anytime. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That really helps our work as well. So thank you all. Be blessed. And pray for each other. Call a friend. Check in on them. See how they're doing. It's a very, very overwhelming time. About 2 nights ago, I woke up with just a horrible panic attack at like 3:30 in the morning. And it was very scary. I had to put on some nice music and try to like breathe, and I was nervous, but it's just overwhelmed. I become so overwhelmed that my own system just doesn't know how to act. It's hard to get a good night's sleep with everything that's going on in this world right now. And we can really use each other and talk to each other. And you never know, that might be something that sparks a huge movement and a huge change just by reaching out to one another. So thanks a lot. Love and grace. Peace. See you all through the week, and hopefully next week as well. Same time, same bat channel. And there you go. Bye-bye.